What if the one man she should fear the most became the only man who ever made her feel safe? The distant wail of a train whistle carried across the wide Montana territory as Gabriella Hayes stood beside her worn-down homestead, a stray lock of chestnut hair blowing across her face. At 23, she was young by most standards, but life had carved strength into her bones. Her father had died last winter, leaving her with nothing but a failing ranch, a pile of debts, and a heart she kept locked tighter than any bank vault. Edwin, the elderly hired hand who had stayed out of loyalty to her father, leaned against his saddle as he called out, "Miss Hayes, those fence posts won't set themselves." "I know," she said softly. "I was just thinking." "Nothing wrong with daydreaming," he said before riding out, "but don't let it keep you up. Tomorrow's another hard day." She watched him go, her hand tightening around the letter she wished she could burn, the bank's final notice. 3 months behind, 30 days left before foreclosure. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "This land is our legacy, Gabby. Don't let anyone take it from you." She wanted to fight. But how long could one woman fight alone? Hoofbeats pulled her from her thoughts. She turned, gripping the rifle always kept nearby. 3 riders came out of the tree line, dust trailing behind them. They looked rough, sunburned, and road-weary. The man in front raised a hand. "Evening, ma'am," he said. "We'd be grateful for some water." She nodded, keeping her rifle visible. "The well's over there. Help yourselves." The men dismounted. The leader walked with a confidence that didn't match his rugged clothes. His dark hair curled beneath his hat, and though he carried a week's worth of stubble, something about him felt steady. "Much obliged," he said with a polite smile. "Name's Colton Reed. These are my partners, Burke and Simmons." "Gabriella Hayes," she replied, giving no more than that. After drinking, Colton's eyes drifted over her worn fences and broken barn shingles. "You've got good land here," he said. "Just need some tending." Quote, "Are you in the habit of pointing out strangers' problems?" she asked. "I'm in the habit of offering help," he nodded toward Burke and Simmons. "We're handy and looking for honest work. Room and board is all we need." She narrowed her eyes. 3 able-bodied men offering free labor? Suspicious. But her ranch was falling apart faster than she could patch it. "I'm not hiring," she said firmly. Colton tipped his hat. "Then we'll be on our way. Thank you for the water." The 3 turned to mount up. "Wait," she called before she could stop herself. He looked over his shoulder, one brow raised. "One night," she said. "Sleep in the barn. We'll talk in the morning." His slow smile unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. "Yes, ma'am. You won't regret it." She hoped he was right. That evening she served them beans and cornbread on the porch. Burke and Simmons ate quickly, barely speaking, but Colton watched the ranch with quiet interest. "Your father built this place?" he asked gently. "Yes." "He did good work." She blinked, surprised by the simple respect in his voice. "No pity, just truth." "And you 3?" she asked. "You're traveling to the mines?" "That's the plan," Colton answered. "Met on the trail. Safety in numbers." He paused, then added, "I was a lawman in Kansas before the job changed. Too much politics, not enough justice." She stiffened. "A sheriff?" He pulled a tarnished badge from his coat. 3 years in Dodge City." She studied his face, searching for lies, but found none she could see. "Barn's open," she said. "Sunrise for work." "Yes, ma'am." The next morning shocked her. Coffee brewed, fences checked, and Colton leading her old plow horse out of the barn, the animal looking healthier than it had in months. "Samson hasn't let anyone touch him since my father died," she said. "Animals respond to respect," Colton replied. "He's a good horse, just needed someone who saw him." They worked all day. Burke fixed fences with the skill of a seasoned blacksmith. Simmons handled irrigation like he'd been born doing it. And Colton, steady, capable, quick, was on the barn roof replacing shingles before she could ask. By dinner, more had been repaired than she'd managed in weeks. "You 3 learned a lot about my ranch in one day," she said. "Good land speaks," Colton replied. "You just have to listen." Their eyes met. Something warm flickered between them, something she refused to name. That night, as lantern light glowed in the barn, Gabriella stood at her window. She had always been cautious, always guarded. But for the first time since her father died, she didn't feel entirely alone. Maybe the ranch wasn't the only thing being repaired. Maybe, just maybe, her heart could be too. What if the only people she dared to trust turned out to be the very men she should have feared? The next week moved faster than Gabriella could comprehend. Every morning at sunrise, Burke and Simmons were already working, and Colton always seemed to be exactly where she needed him without her needing to speak a word. Under their hands, the ranch began to look alive again. The barn roof no longer sagged, the fences stood straight, and the cattle grazed in tidy, well-kept pastures. But, just as the land improved, Gabriella's worry grew heavier. The bank's deadline was now only 3 weeks away. One afternoon, she and Colton walked the property line to check drainage. The late sun bathed the fields in gold. Gabriella carried a quiet tension, and Colton noticed. "That letter from the bank," he said softly, "is it as bad as you think?" Quote. She stiffened. "You were reading my things." "No," he said calmly. "You hold it every evening. You look like someone carrying the world on her shoulders." She sighed. "I owe $200. If I don't pay it, they'll take everything. My father's home, his life's work, everything." Colton considered her words with a seriousness she hadn't seen in him before. "It's a lot, but not impossible." "For me, it is," she said. "I'm a woman alone. No one in town believes I can run this place. No one is willing to help." "Then they're fools," he answered. "You work harder than anyone I've ever known." Gabriella looked away before her emotions became too visible. Compliments felt dangerous. Hope felt dangerous. They were making their way back toward the house when Simmons' shout echoed across the field. "Riders coming! 6 of them!" Colton's expression changed in an instant. His hand went to the pistol on his hip. "Get to the house," he said. "Now." His voice held the command of a man used to giving orders, and Gabriella obeyed before she could think. On the porch, Burke raised a rifle, bracing himself beside Edwin, who had just arrived back for the day. The riders approached with guns visible. Dust swirled around them as they brought their horses to a stop. Gabriella's breath caught. The man in front was Marshal Williams. "Evening, Marshal," Colton called, stepping forward. "Something I can help you with?" Williams dismounted, eyes sharp and cold. "We're looking for you." "Or should I say we're looking for Carson?" Gabriella blinked, confused. "Carson?" The marshal held up a wanted poster. The face on it, rough though it was, resembled Colton. Colton Carson, wanted in 3 territories: bank robbery, murder. Gabriella felt her stomach drop. "That's not true," she said, stepping forward. "He was a sheriff in Kansas." "That's what he tells everyone," the marshal said. "But this man and his gang have been robbing banks for the past 2 years. We got their descriptions from Wyoming. Recognized him the moment they came through town." Gabriella turned to Colton, praying he would deny it. But he didn't. His shoulders lowered. His jaw tightened. "It's complicated," he said quietly. "Not all of it, but some of it is true." Pain cracked through her chest. "You lied to me," she whispered. "I told you part of the truth," he said. "The part one knew you could trust." "Hands up," the marshal ordered. Colton's hand flexed near his pistol. Burke stepped beside him, ready to fight. Simmons looked pale but determined. Time slowed. "Stop!" Gabriella cried, stepping between them. "No one's dying on my land." "Miss Hayes, step aside," the marshal said. "No," she said firmly. "If they surrender peacefully, will you give your word they'll get a fair trial?" The marshal hesitated, then nodded. "If they don't resist, quote." Gabriella turned to Colton, her voice breaking. "Please." Colton stared at her. Conflict raged in his eyes. Then slowly, he raised his hands. "I surrender," he said. "Just leave her out of this." Burke and Simmons followed suit, though Burke cursed under his breath. The marshal's men bound their wrists and led them toward their horses. When they pulled Colton away, he met Gabriella's eyes with regret so deep it nearly crushed her. "I'm sorry," he said, for lying, but not for meeting you." Then he was gone. The ranch felt empty that night, silent in a way that felt wrong. Gabriella tried to work, tried to keep busy, but her thoughts kept circling back to Colton, to his steady hands, his quiet strength, his mistakes, his lies, and the way he had looked at her like she mattered. A week later, she hitched her wagon and drove to town, unable to stand the uncertainty any longer. The sheriff's office smelled of dust and iron. Marshal Williams allowed her 5 minutes to speak with the prisoners. Colton stood when she entered. His eyes softened, as though seeing her brought breath back into his lungs. "Gabriella," he whispered, "what are you doing here?" "I need to know something," she said quietly, standing outside the bars. "Did you come to my ranch just to hide?" "At first, yes," he said without hesitation. "But everything after that was real. Helping you was real. Caring about you was real. You lied about your name," she said. "Yes, but not about who I was with you." She searched his expression, looking for truth. What she saw stole her breath. Remorse, sincerity, and something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name. The marshal signaled that her time was up. "Goodbye, Carson," she said. "Gabriella," he said quickly, gripping the bars. "Meeting you was the best part of my life. I mean that." Her heart twisted painfully as she walked away. The next day, she sat in the back of the town hall as Colton and his men stood trial. When asked if anyone wished to speak for them, she stood before she even knew she had moved. "They helped me," she said. "They worked honestly. They protected me." Quote, "The judge listened. He considered her testimony. When the verdict came, Burke and Simmons received long sentences. Colton's fate hung in the air like a held breath. Finally, the judge said, 10 years, with possible parole after 5. It wasn't freedom, but it wasn't death. As they led Colton away, he looked at Gabriella one last time. The world fell away in that single moment. They had become something to each other, something impossible, something neither of them could name. What if the man she should have walked away from became the only man her heart could ever belong to? Gabriella couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness after the trial. The ranch looked the same, but everything felt wrong without Colton's steady presence. She threw herself into work, but every fence post, every broken latch, every field they had walked together reminded her of him. She didn't know why his absence hurt so much, only that it did. Then, one morning, Edwin rode in with urgent news. "Miss Hayes," he said, breathless. "Those bank guards in Wyoming, the ones they said Carson murdered, they're alive. Alive. Both of them." Gabriella's heart jumped. "What does that mean?" "It means the murder charges were dropped. Judge Thompson is rethinking the sentencing. People say he might reduce their time." For the first time in weeks, hope warmed her chest. The next days were a blur of work and worry. She tried to focus on saving the ranch, but she found herself looking toward the road far too often, praying for a miracle. And then, almost a week later, hope nearly died again when she sat across from the banker, Mr. Holloway. "You're out of time, Miss Hayes," he said. "Either pay in full or the bank takes the ranch." She sat straighter. "I have a proposal." Her voice didn't shake. She wouldn't allow it to. She told him her plan, a partnership instead of foreclosure. The ranch had potential. New stock, new tools, improvements made over the past weeks. Holloway listened, skeptical at first, then thoughtful. After long negotiation, he agreed. The bank would become a partial owner, but Gabriella would keep her land. She had 18 months to make the ranch profitable on paper. It wasn't perfect, but it was hope. 3 days later, while working a young mare in the corral, she saw a man walking toward her from the road. Broad shoulders, familiar stride. Hat in his hands. Her heart stopped. Colton. She dropped the reins and hurried to the fence, breath catching. "Mr. Carson," she said softly. He smiled a tired, hopeful smile. "Judge reduced my sentence. Time served and 5 years probation, as long as I stay out of trouble. And your men? They're headed east." Starting over. He paused, lowering his gaze. I asked to stay here. Marshall approved it, reluctantly. Gabriella swallowed, unsure how to breathe. Why here? She whispered. Because I made a promise, he said gently, to help you save this ranch. And because... He hesitated, pulling his hat through his hands. Because this place felt more like home in 1 week than anywhere I've been in years. Her throat tightened. Colton. I know I lied, he said quickly. I know I gave you reason to doubt me. But I'm asking for a chance to prove myself, not with words, with work, with honesty. He stepped forward, offering his hand. Let me earn my place here, if you'll let me. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, very slowly, she put her hand in his. We start at dawn, she whispered. His smile was brighter than sunrise. Over the next months, the ranch came alive, as if the land itself felt the change. Colton worked harder than anyone. He repaired, rebuilt, replanted. He helped her expand the cattle herd. He read with her in the evenings. He cooked when she was tired. He listened when the world felt heavy. Little by little, trust grew in the quiet moments between them. Autumn came. One evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky like fire. Colton grew quiet, then spoke in a low, serious voice. There's something I need to tell you, he said, something I should have shared sooner. Her pulse quickened. What is it? Quote. It's why I left being a sheriff. He took a breath. I fell in love with the wrong woman, the mayor's daughter. She pretended to love me. Her father paid me to leave, and when I confronted her, she laughed. Said she'd never marry a man like me. Gabriella felt a painful squeeze in her chest. Colton! It broke something in me, he said. Made me think I wasn't worth loving. Made me drift. Made me weak enough to fall in with the wrong men. He looked at her with raw emotion. But being here, working beside you, Gabriella, I started to feel like myself again. Her breath trembled. I can't be loved, Colton. He froze. What? My mother left when I was 8, she whispered. She packed her things and walked away. My father spent the rest of his life loving someone who didn't love him back. I promised myself I'd never be that vulnerable, never depend on someone else's love only to lose it. Colton stepped close, eyes full of compassion. Then, let me show you how, he said softly. Let me show you love that stays, love that doesn't run, love that grows stronger every day. She felt the walls around her heart tremble. How? She whispered. By proving it, he said. By showing up every day. By loving you the only way I know how, with everything in me. Quote. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm afraid. I am too, he said, but I'd rather be afraid with you than safe without you. Something deep inside her finally gave way. She stepped forward and kissed him, and it felt like finding home. Months passed in warmth and hard work. By Christmas, the ranch was thriving. Colton gave her a silver wild rose brooch, his mother's, and told her he wanted a future with her. That night, by firelight, he asked her to marry him, and she said yes. Their wedding took place in early spring of 1877. Simple, beautiful, surrounded by mountains and a handful of people who cared. When they vowed their love, Gabriella felt the last shadow of fear lift from her heart. Years passed. They built a family, a thriving ranch, a life full of laughter, growth, and more love than Gabriella ever believed she deserved. One snowy evening, with Colton's arms around her and their children playing nearby, she whispered, I never thought I could be loved. Colton kissed her forehead gently. And I told you, he murmured, then let me show you how. And he did, every day, for the rest of their lives.